start now. So I want to start out by thanking you all for being here because sexual assault is such a widespread issue, but you can't fix a problem if you never talk about it. So thank you for coming to join the conversation and listening to me today. One disclosure I would like to start with, though, is less than 1% of reported sexual assaults are actually false accusations. So with that, I'm Natalie Bramwell, and I'm here to talk to you about how we can work together to combat sexual assault. So what exactly is sexual assault? The Idaho Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence defines it as any behavior or contact of a sexual nature that is unwanted, from sexual harassment to rape. So that's kind of one of the boundaries and barriers that makes it a little hard to talk about sexual assault because there are so many different levels and definitions and ways that it can happen. One of those is most widely accepted one, which is force, where someone uses physical force. The next is coercion, which can be physical force, but can also be psychological manipulation. And since we already have a bad rep and cycle of talking about mental health in this country, it's a little hard to talk about the psychological issues that can come with that. And then next there's manipulation, which can be coercion or force, and also anything from blackmail to threats. And so that's what makes it a little more difficult to join this conversation, but once you know that there are different definitions, it makes it a lot more simple to actually talk about and comprehend. And so why is this applicable to everyone in this room? Because 1 in 5 women in their life will be raped, and for men, it'll be 1 in 71. And as far as sexual violence goes, it'll be 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men. So chances are you actually know someone who has experienced sexual assault, but you just may not know that you know them. And something that society does, a misconception they have as a whole, is the fact that they blame the victims a lot, like what were they wearing, what were they doing, were they flirting, were they on drugs, were they drinking alcohol, were they at a bar, were they alone? They say all those things are the reason that someone gets raped, when in reality, as this graphic shows, it's actually the sexual assault perpetrator's fault 100% of the time. So with that, there are a lot of reasons that victims do not come forward with their stories, and this is actually a video that talks about that.
I was 22 when I was raped.
I was 19.
I was 20. I didn't report it for, 1,000 reasons, a million reasons. It was somebody I was involved with. It was a friend of a friend.
My drug dealer.
Met this photographer by myself. I got very drunk. I met some guy in this bar.
He started trying to kiss me and I said no.
He takes my left leg and raises it on his shoulder.
He went to put his hand in my panties and I tried to kind of deflect his hand, and that's when he slapped my hand away.
I blacked out.
I was fighting pretty hard at this point, just saying no, please don't, please don't.
I came to, internally I was shaking. I was really trying to look as calm as possible, and I could tell that something that I hadn't wanted to happen happened.
He held me down and he forced himself inside me.
I was being pleasant and nice just so I could remain safe and get out of there. And I kind of just ran out into the street with my pants on inside out and my shoes off.
And he sat up and he looked at me, and that was, I guess, the scariest moment for me because I could tell he was deciding whether he was actually going to stop or not, and that was the moment that I realized that I had thought I was in control of a situation that I was not in control of at all.
And I blame myself for putting myself in that situation.
I knew that I had no proof.
I could hear people's judgment saying, well, why did you do that? It was your fault. I was still in physical pain from this and sitting there going, oh, well, no one's gonna believe me.
It was my word against his.
Everyone was gonna go, this girl just, slept with this guy and changed her mind.
I wasn't the perfect victim.
I figured who's gonna believe some cokehead college girl? I didn't try to fight him off, or didn't slap him around, or, I didn't pick up the phone and call 911. I didn't know that I was important enough to draw boundaries around what people could and couldn't do with my body.
Who wants to come forward with the literal most violating thing that can happen to you, relive it, and then have people telling you that you're making it up.
I thought I would just be better off trying to put this behind me.
I couldn't imagine pressing charges and then having to sit in a courtroom and look at his face over and over.
I thought, well, you know, that's like giving him what he wants. Like, I'm putting more time on him, we're putting more energy on this.
I imagine, and I think rightfully so, that it would have been more traumatizing for me in many ways had I reported it.
It's up to a survivor to decide what they do with their story. It's up to them if they want to report it or not.
I don't want this to be part of who I am.
I hated myself a lot at the time.
We are violated, we are harassed, we are touched, we're trapped, we're scared, and we just take a chip on the shoulder and we keep our lives going, and that's not fair to us.
And I think it would be wrong to tell them that they don't get to decide what happens next.
So, as you can see in that video, there's a lot of reasons that people don't come forward, and a lot of it actually has to do with self-blaming, which actually kind of stems from society blaming victims of sexual assault for what happens to them, which is, again, 100% incorrect. And something that actually is the root of this dilemma is the fact that we do not have comprehensive sexual education in the United States. So we don't even talk about the basis of it correctly. So it's a little harder to just jump to this without being able to have the root of that being taught well. And a study shows that 93% of parents support the teaching of sex ed in middle school, and 96% show that they support the teaching of it in high school. And actually currently in Idaho, last week in the House, a bill passed about, instead of the typical parents having the opt-out option for their kids in sex ed, they're making it an opt-in, so it's even less accessible than it was before. So what exactly is comprehensive sexual education? According to the United States Council of Sexuality and Health Information, they say it is an age-appropriate, medically accurate information on a broad set of topics related to sexuality, including human development, relationships, decision-making, abstinence, contraception, and disease prevention. Yet only 8 states of the 50 require a mention of sexual assault or consent, and their policies don't actually even outline what is supposed to be taught under said topics. Yet 25 of the states have a stressing abstinence policy, which is in their sex education. And studies have shown that the average age nowadays that an American teenager loses their virginity is the age of 17, yet we're not even teaching it correctly when the average age is before people graduate. And I think the basis of sexual education shouldn't actually be the scare tactics it is about teenage pregnancy and STIs. That's all important information, but they should start with the basis of yes and no. Because in other languages, si or no, ju or nein, ju or nein, it all means the same exact thing. Yes or no is universal across every language, yet it seems to be lost in the language of sex. Oh, and also if you see the blank one, yeah, that's Idaho. We don't have any policies on our sex ed and what's supposed to be taught. So what can we do to actually help survivors of sexual assault? Something I've heard a lot, especially in the last year with the whole Me Too movement, is people that aren't necessarily against getting justice for sexual assault survivors, but they don't know what to say when someone comes forward with their story. They're afraid they're going to react in the wrong way, but then by not reacting, it just perpetuates all the different issues about not talking about an issue and getting to the root of the problem. So one thing that's super important is to just love them. Everyone in this world could use a little more love regardless, but especially when someone is violated on the whole new level that comes with being sexually assaulted. They need someone to show that they care. I'm not saying you should carry them on your back and help them through life, because regardless of what anyone's going through, you shouldn't carry anyone emotionally and do all that, because there are other people that can help. but like check in on them periodically, maybe send some texts, maybe bring by their favorite ice cream if you know them that well. And if not, just be like, hey, notice you were a little off today. And just try to show them that you care and you're there for them without like pushing too many boundaries. And it can just, be casual texts every once in a while. And then something else that's super important to stress is not victim blaming, because as that video showed and as we see in society, victims are blamed enough by themselves and the society as a whole around them. So they don't need someone that they're confiding in or telling their story to, or even if they didn't directly tell you, they don't need people that weren't there telling them it didn't happen. And even if someone was there, they don't need to invalidate their experience. So actually something we should do is do the opposite, tell the victim it wasn't their fault, because that is in fact the truth of the situation. And then another thing we can do is to acknowledge the experience affected their life, but not do so in a degrading way, telling them that their whole life was ruined by someone else ignoring their right to their own body. Rather more of a, I see that this affected your life and like it's been really difficult, but like I'm here for you. And also tell them they're doing great, even if they're not really taking care of themselves really well, which commonly happens after someone is sexually assaulted and they're dealing with the trauma of what happens after going through that. If they have like love and support building them up, then they will actually like be able to pick themselves back up, rather than someone telling them like, oh, what the heck, you're not really like taking care of yourself, you're kind of letting yourself go, because that's kind of the least important. Like their mental well-being and emotional well-being is way more important than like other stuff. I mean, it's important to take care of yourself, but sometimes there are priorities that people need to have, and we need to respect where they're coming from and what they're dealing with. And then another thing we can do is know the resources. Locally, we have right here in school counselors, psychiatrists, and a social worker that are all here for more, well, counselors especially, more here than just to like help us get through our classes and stuff. They're here to help us and help us find resources to get the help that we need. So whether it's you or someone close to you, they're very good resources. And there's also the Idaho Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, and they fight abuse, both physical abuse and sexual abuse. And then there's also Speak Your Silence, which is a local organization that is like founded upon the idea of giving survivors of sexual assault a platform and like a community to be able to tell their stories and tell their truth and talk about their trauma. And they also provide like a range of like counseling services regardless of your financial security, which is huge, because I've even had friends who like need therapy, but they're like, I just can't afford it. And that's how it is with our healthcare in this country. So it's nice that there are organizations that are working. And there's also some pamphlets. I mean, there's this is from the Idaho Coalition Against Sexual and Domestic Violence, and it's broken down into 3 mini pamphlets, one on sexual harassment, another on abusive relationships, and then the last is actually about supporting friends who have experienced abusive relationships or sexual assault. So after I'm done, feel free to grab any of those. Alright, so I've been talking pretty generally about what everyone can do to fight sexual assault, but I would kind of want to focus right now on the men. And I'm not here to reprimand or name call or blame anyone. I actually am saying that we need to plead with men to be able to help us, because everyone is affected by this regardless of sexuality, gender identity, socioeconomic background, ethnicity, race, everyone's affected, so everyone needs to join the fight. So it would be really helpful if everyone would join in on the fight, because there are some ways that rape culture is perpetuated that people don't necessarily know about because they're a little more subtle. And one of those is defining masculinity as dominant and sexually aggressive, while defining femininity as passive and sexually submissive. And then also pressure from society and peers on men to score. Then the assumption that promiscuous women are the only ones that get raped, which is incorrect. And another correct assumption that no men get raped or only weak men get raped, which in case is not actually the fact at all. So how do we combat this, and how can men help us combat this? First of all, just don't assume consent in any situation you're in. Definitive yes or definitive no. Anything other than a definitive yes is a no. That's a good way to take it, just take 2 seconds, because it could honestly change someone's life if you just take 2 seconds in a situation to make sure it's a safe situation for both parties involved. Then speak out against locker room talk. Jokes do pass the line, and it's not funny because if you joke about something, it normalizes it subconsciously, and then you think that it's something that you can joke about and brush off when sexual assault is not a topic to brush off, and it's actually very serious. And then if a friend of yours was sexually assaulted, then just try to help them like I was talking about in the last slide. Just try to support them the best you can. Don't try to take it all on yourself, but do try to help them. And then if even worse, a friend of yours assaults someone, please do not stay silent, because if friends of perpetrators spoke out more, maybe this wouldn't be such a widespread issue as it is today. So forget the bro code, forget friendships, forget like them being mad at you, because sexual assault ruins lives temporarily and sometimes even permanently. So here are some sources that you can support and lobby for. These are different organizations that all work to fight sexual assault, and a lot of them actually like to get legislation passed that helps more education around sexual assault to be available. And yeah, they also all provide help for sexual assault survivors. So there's the Date Safe Project, End Rape on Campus, which is more college focused, the One Love Foundation, Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. They're the ones that sponsor the National Sexual Assault Hotline. That's the number. Then there's Safe Bay, National Alliance to End Sexual Violence, and then also the other ones in the earlier slide I talked about. And then something else important that people don't always talk about is when you're a voting age or a voter in this country, you should pay attention to what's going on, especially with issues that are important like sexual assault. So stay informed on policies like the one going through the Idaho House right now that passed. It just needs to pass in the Senate, and then sexual education in Idaho will be even less accessible, and so it's not too good. But yeah, and then also pay attention to candidates and their stances on issues such as this and what they're trying to accomplish, because if we paid more attention to voting as a country, maybe we wouldn't have so many people in office that we don't actually agree with what they're doing or what they support. And so those are just a few ways you can help lobbying for those organizations, and there are also other ones that are good too. These are just a few I chose. And yeah, I'd like to thank you again for coming to my presentation and hope you'll join the fight against sexual assault.